gotta take another look at her, 'cause it doesn't move. Look across the oceans, look across the land, and please, if you see that curve, can you tell it where I am? They'll try to tell you stories you need to understand. It's not round, it's just a big flat piece of land. Although it makes no sense, they say we're spinning round. How can this be true when my feet stay on the ground? 'Cause if one day you wake up and see that earth ain't no ball, and you look in the distance and see there's no curve at all, I said try not to worry, as it does all who've been fooled. They've been ramming it down our throats since the first day we were school. Earth's not moving, Earth's not moving, yeah. Spaceman said, look, we're floating here. I said, I don't think so, dude. I see wires everywhere. You gotta watch your back if these coming lie to you. How can they go Mars when they can't even go the moon? 'Cause if one day you wake up, see that earth ain't no ball, and you look in the distance and see there's no curve at all.
So welcome back, Cameron. It was great being able to reconnect with you and speak to your father after that disastrous microphone.
Maybe it cut out the worst of it, so who knows.
So would you mind starting off and explaining why you came towards the subject?
Well, initially my research was into the financial system. I remember in 2008 when it was all going wrong and everyone in the mainstream media just couldn't understand what was going wrong. So I started researching that. I have an economics degree, and it was then I came across the concept of central banking. And if you study economics, you never ever actually look at central banking as a concept or in a look at alternatives. And even though the whole of the economics profession puts forward the theory that competition is better for consumers because you don't have one firm dominating and able to force their products and prices on everyone else. If there's competition, people can choose, and they'll choose the cheapest and the best, which will encourage the firms to lower their prices. But monopoly works the complete opposite. The power is completely with the firm. And you go into any university library and look at an economics book and look for central banking, and it's hardly mentioned. And the alternatives to central banking are never ever discussed. It's as if central banking is a fact of nature.
Even though that's very, very prominent in their idea of the banking system and where they want to go with it, it's just completely centralised the whole thing. It's
completely centralised. That is an economic fact of nature. It's never discussed, well, money is the most important thing in an organised economy. What if money wasn't centralised? What if there was more freedom to it, more local currencies, more different currencies? It's never even analysed. And as soon as you see that, it affects intellectual corruption. To not look at the most important thing in the economy and apply the principles that you believe in of competition to analyse it, the fact that it's not even discussed just shows how corrupted and how short-sighted an area of intellect, academic research can be, even though people have been lots of intelligent people in universities, complete paucity in looking at that for actual truth and analysis and coming up with the best system. And it was the same in the mainstream. You never heard the Bank of England mentioned throughout the whole financial crisis. How does that Bank of England work? Is that maybe the problem? It just wasn't discussed, was it? You heard it in America. Americans are more open to non-monopoly money because it was more recently that they had the fight against, the 19th century was a fight by people supporting central banking against people who wanted a more open market. But in Britain, the Bank of England came in the 1690s. There's never been a culture of people understanding the horror of central banking. So as soon as you realise one area that you thought was open-minded and honest is actually corrupt, then you have to accept that other areas are. So that just started a more open-minded look at things. Mainly about economics and about power, human power. You know, and there's lots of stuff about reptiles and about aliens that it actually never interested me, and it still actually doesn't interest me.
Me too.
You know, I like it's more science-based, whether it's social science. And that's why when I started watching, it actually wasn't the flatness of the Earth, it was the fact that it's obvious it's just not spinning at 1,100 miles an hour that really got me initially. You know, sitting on a very still day with no air and seeing a plume of smoke going up straight, yeah, and staying straight. If you believe you're in a ball of physical matter with gas round and that's spinning, now gas and solids, they act differently under the same energy forces. So the idea that the gas could be spinning like a solid glass, and that's the only way that would allow a straight plume of smoke, is if the gas and the solid were all going around perfectly in harmony, as if gases and solids act differently. So when you see a plume of smoke rising on a still day, and when you move from east to west or west to east and can't feel any different, you know you're not in a ball spinning with gas round at 1,100 miles an hour, because it's impossible to explain how a plume of smoke could go up like that and you'd be on a thing spinning at 1,100 miles an hour. It's bloody fast. You jump up and it's faster than a speeding bullet. The idea that you could have a plume of smoke that stays there. So it was the spinning rather than the flatness. It was this. You know, I believe in scientific truth, particularly when technology shows, and the conservation principles of energy. You can't argue with it. It's everywhere. Or animals know that if a big animal's running at it, it's going to be sore. So to say, yes, it feels like we're on a still thing, but actually it's moving at 1,100 miles an hour, that's a huge amount of energy. We'd see it in the gas, there'd be lines east to west. I think it would be crazy if we were on a spinning, it'd be chaos.
Yeah, and it's completely different to what you just described, the natural things that you can observe, but this you can't observe.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're supposed to create a huge leap of faith and believe it's happening.
And once you realise there's corruption in areas, you have to come back to first principles and say, I won't believe opinion. I won't disbelieve it. I won't believe opinion. I'll only believe what I can actually prove myself. And with reason as well. You know, I think, was it Plato that said one shouldn't use opinion, you should use reason? And I think you have to have that frame of mind. People lie, they always have, and more powerful institutions are more prone to lying. So if something actually doesn't fit in with your own personal experience, at the very least you have to doubt it, regardless of the level of majesty of the authority figure that's telling you about it.
But don't you find that with that principle and that outlook, that a lot of people will say, but why would they lie? But yet you have to have that first principle of doubt and scepticism that they may lie, but there's so many people who respond to me and say, but why would they lie? As if there were some sort of higher moral code. You know?
Well, ask them why groups of men would hold females down and shove sharp things up their vaginas. That happens, doesn't it? Ask them to explain why people do that. Humans do terrible things.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah. They do.
And, you know, knowledge is power. What does that mean? What knowledge is a competitive advantage. If you know something and your group knows something, it's in your interests to keep that aspect of reality quiet. In business and in science, you know, people keep the scientific secrets to themselves until they can benefit from it fully. And it's always worth considering, up until 50 years ago, it was all theoretical. These guys back in the 16th, 17th to 18th century who were talking about a spinning ball, they probably believed it because it fit in with their religious beliefs. So up until 50 years ago, it was people who'd fallen into believing that. It wasn't a great conspiracy of people knowing that we were, because people hadn't got off the earth and they hadn't gone to the ice, so they didn't know whether it was actually flat or spinning. It was only 50 years ago, once people got off, that actually people started lying. And when you think about the control systems that we've gone through, central banking was nailed down. The dictatorship of central banking started in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was set up. And when you look at, imagine a game of Monopoly played for 200 years, for hundreds of years, with the banker issuing the money at interest. Imagine that game played for 200 years. What would you have? Monopoly. monopoly of everything important. Monopoly of finance, monopoly of communication, monopoly of the important institutions of power. Because most people aren't playing the game of power. But the fact that a central bank's there in the first place means that people deliberately try to monopolise the money for wealth and power. They're playing the game. So it's a game of monopoly where most people are going about spending time with their families and working and getting money, and they're using this monopolistic money run by people who are playing the game of power. That's reason. If a game of monopoly where the one group is issuing the money at interest and it's the only money you can use and they're inflating it, then monopoly will happen. And one should use, I think, reason like that to understand, not what you're being told. So therefore, let's just assume we're under total monopoly because the bankers have been controlling the most important commodity, money, for centuries. So 50 years ago, they would have discovered that actually there is some sort of dome up there. But by that point, because the Federal Reserve came in 1913, this earth is controlled, totally controlled. It has to be, because the game of Monopoly has been played for hundreds of years. It has to be controlled. Not everything, but the important institutions of power and wealth being played by the central bankers will be controlled.
Yeah, and
so the lie only started 50 years ago, really.
Yeah,
when the earth was controlled.
Jekyll Island was a
Jekyll Island, 1913. Yeah.
But you can see that extended with different countries like Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. It's trying to monopolise that to extend it on a global scale.
Yeah.
And these people aren't coming under rule or following the debt of the American monopoly of money.
Yeah.
And they're a threat, so they have to be taken out.
Yeah, taken out. Yeah, Gaddafi wanted to set up an African gold dinar, taken out. Yeah. Hussein wanted to pay for oil in, I think it was euros rather than dollars, taken out. It's their banker wars, and it's once and people can see that the huge bailouts, they were crazy. Taxpayers having to pay trillions to bail out the bankers, and for people to say that bankers don't control things when they can see the evidence for themselves. Look further. Make the assumption that bankers and a group of people, it's not just one person, it's a group of people, powerful people who own the institutions of power, have controlled things at least since 1913.
Well, I'm sure you're aware of this, which I read about the Rothschilds, was that during Waterloo, the Battle of Waterloo, I can't remember when that was, 17th century or something, or even before that, but he was the richest landowner in Britain, and his men got first word of who won.
Yes, that's right.
So he knew that Britain had won it, but he started spreading lies saying Napoleon had won it.
Yeah.
We've lost. So he started selling all his property. Yeah. And every other businessman and banker started selling theirs.
And the price went down.
And the prices went down, and he bought the whole lot back up again. And ever since then, every 10, 15 years, they create this crash.
Yeah.
Just so that the companies will lose loads of money, and the shares will drop and the prices will drop, and then he comes in and buys a lot up again.
Yeah. And there's lots of great quotes, if you let central bankers control the money supply, they will end up controlling the earth, because they control the thing that you buy land, gold and people's time with, and they're inflating it as well. Destroying everyone else's purchasing power, destroying real wages should go up with technological development, but they're going down because their currencies the purchasing power of the currencies is being destroyed. Pensions should go up. You should be able to save well in your fit productive years when you're 20 and 30, and then that's if you were saving in a stable money source. With technological development, that stable money source should be worth a fortune in your 70s and should last you for your old age. But the purchasing power of money is being destroyed. So everything is being destroyed. Pensions are being destroyed. Real wage. It's been the greatest it's the greatest robbery in mankind's history. And most people because your £100 is still there week to week, month to month, year to year. They can't see the robbery. It's the purchasing power of the money that's being eroded. So the actual value stays the same, but what they can get. So they have to put in 20 hours to get a certain amount of money. When they come and they save it, when they come to spend it 10 years later, it's only worth 10 hours now. They've lost in terms of their time. They're putting in their time, and it's being stolen for their old age. Just another robbery. And a very clever robbery by monopolising and inflating one commodity that everyone has in their pocket. The commodity that you earn and swap your time for, the commodity that you save for your old. It's so important that you save for your old age for.
That pension should be allowed to be invested like in gold or something, something substantial that's not going to. And
if we were in an enlightened place, people would be educated that they shouldn't put their money into a financial system they don't understand. That's how you get robbed. Oh yeah, I put all my money into a system I don't understand. Well, if they are willing to bail out for the richest people in the society, then you'd think they'd help the poorest people, wouldn't you? So to come back to answer your question, why would they do it? Humans do the most despicable things, but also it started off, it wasn't secular reasoning that Galileo and Copernicus, it was an internal church battle. There's a great interview with the head guy of the Lucifer Observatory in America, and it's a Catholic observatory, and yes, it's called the Lucifer Observatory. He's a Jesuit, and it's on YouTube, and he said Galileo would have said anything the Catholic Church wanted. There's a reason that the Catholic Church fingerprints are all over that intellectual debate, because it was an internal Catholic Church intellectual theological argument. And when you look at the Jesuits' flag, that's why it's the sun. The Jesuits' flag is the sun. It was about making, they worship the sun, and it was about making the sun the centre rather than this big plane of earth with a small disc in the sky. It was about making the sun the centre. That got presented as secular reasoning, and it got believed. People weren't lying. You know, and in the 80s they would have believed it because nobody had ever left the earth. It was only 50 years ago with the Americans that the big lie started. Because if you're in control, if you're a central banker, you're in control. If you're in control, you don't want shocks to the system that you don't control. You just don't want shocks intellectually. You want to control. Automatically, anything new that comes along will be blocked until they understand that it can be released in ways that benefit them. So as soon as they truly found out there was a dome, and a Rothschild, I think, in the 1850s wouldn't have known. How could they? They didn't have the technology the same as us. But as soon as they found out it was a dome, think about the spiritual change. If you're in control, that's the last thing you want to happen. You don't want a big change to the system that you control. So they blocked it. Knowledge is a competitive advantage. Maybe they'll release it again when they think they can use it better, or maybe they never will. Maybe once they've got that competitive advantage that they know what system we live in and everyone else doesn't, they can use it to some greater advantage. So I don't know how it will develop. It will develop in ways that powerful people think it's to their advantage. So people shouldn't be surprised why a big truth that comes out in the 1950s has been, of course it would. If you're in control, in any system, if you're in control, you don't want something unknown and new hitting into the system, so you stop it.
This thing with the dome, I mean, at first I didn't really consider that, but the more I'm into the subject, I'm thinking, yeah, I could see the implications and the reasoning behind a dome. I mean, what makes you think there is a dome?
Oh, I don't know if there is. I suppose the big argument that I'll stand by and talk to people is that we're not spinning. There's no energy here. We're on a still day. We're not spinning at 1,100 miles because we'd feel the energy.
The water in the leaves tell you that.
Yeah, and little butterflies being able to get used to it.
And also, which I just thought about recently, I'm not sure if somebody else told me or not, but because you're reading and you're watching and talking to so many people, I can't remember where some of the information comes from.
No, same with me.
A seagull soaring downwind, not even flapping its wings, just soaring with the wind. So he's soaring along at 1,000 miles an hour, and then he turns direction to go the opposite way. Now that change in velocity would cripple its wings and feathers everywhere. Yeah. But no, it just glides beautifully around and goes at the same speed the opposite direction.
Absolutely. The amount of energy with a huge amount of gas spinning around at 1,100 miles an hour. You know, it's not just that we'd be aware of it, it would be destroying us every second of every moment.
It's such a powerful force.
Yeah. It feels like we're in a stationary thing. If on a still day it feels like there's no movement.
All your senses tell you.
You have to accept that, because a big energy source like being in a ball spinning at one yes. So whether it's a dome or not, I mean, it's fascinating what the stars are. Yeah. There's some interesting theories out there, but I wouldn't argue any of them. But I would argue, how can we be on a spinning ball at 1,100 miles an hour? And the flatness does seem to make sense. Yeah. But as to what you do see some models that seem to suggest it. Have you seen those? But who knows? More research, I think, is. No. But it's certainly not curving at the curvature that they say it is. Because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've stood at Port Patrick and I've seen the coastal road of Ireland. And I think it was 21 miles away, and I shouldn't have been able to see it according to the curvature of the Earth.
And there's numerous focal points around the Earth. You can see things that you shouldn't be able to see.
Yeah. Is it Chicago? Have you seen the picture of it? Is it Chicago skyline?
Oh, no, that's mirage. No, you don't want to get carried away thinking that's the actual.
You can't actually see it. It's an illusion.
let authority tell you what you're seeing. Don't trust your senses. You know?
What's the lake in front of Chicago? Is it
Lake Michigan?
Yeah, you can see right across Lake Michigan.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
things like the Channel Tunnel and the bridges, because they're so long, the engineering should have compensated for the curvature of the Earth.
Yeah.
And there's no engineering project in the world, that's, as far as I'm aware, that has ever compensated for the curvature of
Well,
the Earth.
especially the most glaring example of that is the Suez Canal.
Yeah,
All canals operate because they're on a flat level.
yeah,
100 miles long.
yeah. Yeah.
It's insulting intelligence, really, isn't it?
It is actually insulting intelligence, but the big problem is people believe things when you don't critically think when you're a child. You have to believe what you're told because you're a little child.
Yeah.
And most adults don't go back to what they were taught at that period when they weren't critical thinking and actually apply critical thinking to it.
Yeah.
So many people are proud of the fact they still believe at 80 what they believed when they were 18. Even though at 18 they had to have accepted things that they weren't critically thinking because they were children.
Yeah. Well,
And we can look at other society of humans being imprinted with all sorts of crazy... And humans can say, oh, of course, yeah, children are affected by their upbringing, but they never turn that same laser of reason onto their own beliefs in childhood.
because surely that's the brainwashing, isn't it?
It is.
And I remember asking a student, I said, at 5, when we accepted that, do you think that was critical thinking? And the student came back and said, well, we hadn't developed a critical thinking at that age. I said, that's right, but you still think that now, don't you? So is that an adult using their critical thinking or not?
Exactly, yeah. They just blindly accept what they were taught as kids, yeah.
So you said in the park that I was first, was I the first person or
No,
randomly?
Yeah, the first person I'd ever come across. I've got one person that I speak to the new environment we find ourselves in, but apart from that, no. I've raised it with... I raised the density question. If an apple's going down, and isn't that density? Don't things go up and down in gases and liquids because of density? No, I got... and people are entitled to be whom they want and believe what they want.
What about your family? Is there any family members who are receptive to it?
No. To the flat earth? Oh no,
I find everybody's, not ours, but everybody's families are the last people to be receptive to it because they have an image about you. I think they know you, and you're off into this crazy realm, and they just don't want to accept it.
A family member will feel the fear for you, whereas a stranger won't feel fear for you. Those things, but a family member will be concerned about you.
Yeah, I've often said that, but I think it's also coupled with feeling threatened that something that they've been fooled with all their life.
It could be some of that, yeah. I think in my case it would just be my parents would be... Even if your family agrees with you, going against the stream, it can be dangerous. It can be troublesome. It can create mental health issues to believe you're alone. I think it's called a Cassandra, somebody that's always shouting out. So even if your family agree with you, they can still be concerned that you're actually wanting to do something unsafe, as start talking about things that most of humanity don't agree with. So yeah, there's lots of reasons, but you're right. Family, I think.
The hardest nut to crack.
And I've no interest in persuading my family members to. I just haven't. There's a lot of ego that can come with thinking you've just discovered a truth, and that is shown by the fact that people get angry. It's not this altruistic, I must share the truth. It's, why won't people agree with me? I know the truth. Why? And that's why you see people getting angry that people are calling them idiots and heretics and conspiracy theorists. People don't like being thought of as silly, and at first we have doubts about our own beliefs. We do think, could this really have happened? Is humanity that bloody awful that we've found ourselves in a totally controlled environment?
Yes, but probably like me, you went through quite a lot of other falsehoods, and you realise that there is a lot of evil in the world, and then when you come to flat Earth, you think, well, yeah, it all makes sense. And of course, yeah, there are evil people. I'm already there, 90% of the way with it. Psychopaths and narcissists controlling and running things, so it wasn't new to me. But when you actually started to think that, okay, you don't live in a spinning ball of bendy water, did it make you feel good, or did you have negative feelings, or? Because some people mention they get depressed and they get down.
No, not about that actually. It was quite exciting. It was quite interesting.
Me too. I think
Well,
it's quite empowering, you know.
it's more the financial people being robbed through the small communities being poor for generations and looking deprived, and that gets me more than we don't, because it is what it is really, ultimately. And for most of humanity's history, it hasn't mattered, you know, because we haven't been able to get off the ground and we haven't been able to get off beyond the earth. So in a practical sense, it's been irrelevant. A lot of people say that the flat earth and the dome shows that God's real, but I don't see that. It's just another crazy, you know, whether it's a whole universe marching out of a magic hole that magically appeared for no reason at all, or you find yourself in sort of a snow glow dome. They're both equally crazy. They are equally crazy and equally irrational. You can't. There's no further truth from knowing we're in a globe than in a dome.
I need a third option, an even more crazier one, is living on a ball with spinning, bending water on it. That's even more crazy.
Because it goes against our scientific and technological experience.
Yeah, and natural observation.
Yeah. We'd feel the energy. How can smoke go up in a straight line?
Yeah.
But us garnering further truth, we're still prisoners, whether it's prisoners in a dome or prisoners on a ball spinning alone through space. Well, I'm assuming we're prisoners, who knows what beyond, but...
Did you ever see the TV series in the 60s, The Prisoner, Patrick McGowan?
No, but I saw the film that was recently made. I actually had a very strange, I won't go into it, but I had a very strange experience with it.
Did you?
Because it is about a prisoner of their own mind.
It's absolutely fantastic what they've done. It's absolutely amazing in how they brainwashed the whole globe of people. See, I used the word globe there.
You did. It's easily done. I use planet all the time. It's very hard. It's very difficult.
Well, I should say brainwashed a whole flat plane of people, but then that doesn't roll off my tongue yet. You know, I'm still thinking.
You can still say universe. It is now a universe. If we're in a, if we're in a, as far as we know, this now humanity or Earth is our universe. You know, there's been clever people out there who have spent lots of money and lots of time thinking about how to influence and control humans. Humans are the ultimate predator. People like to say we're spiritual gods. No, we're not. We're the ultimate predators, and we prey on the energy of, from slavery all the way up. We prey on the energy of other human beings. That's what humans do.
But then, I'm a firm believer that not all humans would do that. But I think the vast majority of people would abuse that power and take advantage of it.
If you and I were born into the Rothschild families, we'd be no different.
Yeah. You'd be so brainwashed into that. Your mentality would be so different.
And I think it's why we shouldn't look at these people as evil. They're humans. It's
hard not to.
It's very hard not to, but we must accept that change can't come by putting in a different set of humans into systems of power. Once you recognise that throughout the whole of history, we're chimpanzees. Not Genghis Khan, Emperor of China, he lived in his palace with 5,000 females that only he could have sex with, and 3,000 castrated males, eunuchs. Now imagine finding a chimpanzee in the forest and seeing this male chimpanzee sitting there with 5,000 females that only he can have sex with and 3,000 castrated chimps, male chimps. So he's the only male with balls and the only male that can have sex. Humans take chimpanzee strategies. The Emperor of China was a human being. That's what humans do with power. And for humans now to think, oh, but all these people in power are spiritual people they're looking after, when history gives us examples, such unbelievably extreme examples of what a human being does with power, that makes chimpanzees look like child play. When it comes to chimpanzee strategies, humans have the communication and the tools to put in effect strategies that your average chimp would be salivating with jealousy at the power that a human can have over his neighbours.
So I'm going to give you a position of power tomorrow. Would you personally abuse that power?
Well, no, I'd not want to, but I'm a human being. You know, over time, maybe some incident would happen. Maybe now it would be fine. In a year, it would still be fine. But maybe some incident would happen that I fell in love with somebody, or I wanted something, and I would abuse it because I could. The tool was there. The hammer was there. I've got a hammer. I know I can use it, and I can get away with it. And I really want that thing. I really want it.
So you don't think you'd have your conscience would stop you doing that, I think?
Well, I'd love to say yes. I'd love to say no, I wouldn't abuse it, but I'm a human being and I've fallen in madness before. I've fallen for women and been crazy and been thinking, how can I get her back? I've wanted jobs, I've wanted things, and I've thought of strategies of how to get them, that and justified things that I wouldn't have previously. So it's once you go through an environment, it's like most humans wouldn't kill other human beings, but you put them in the same environment and
they all would
they'll,
kill.
they'll butcher. Yeah.
They'd all kill if you had children and they were about to be butchered in front of you. Of course you would kill.
Yeah.
Everyone's got that in them.
Yeah. So let's make the assumption that every human being would be hypnotised by positions of power, and the lesson should be nobody should have a position of power over their neighbour's property. That should be it, because we're human beings, which means we're driven by egotistical chimpanzee want. Even communication. When a child says mummy, what it's really saying is I want.
Yeah.
The first time we communicate, it's saying I want, and all communication should be viewed. That's why you shouldn't believe what people are telling you. You shouldn't disbelieve it, because all communication is I want. If a human being doesn't want anything, the human being will just sit there quietly and not say anything. When a human being even if it's wanting other people to think they're kind or think they're great, humans only communicate because they're wanting something. And what we must remember that for all state communication channels, corporate, the guy sitting next to you, they're communicating because they want something. Even if it's to be friendly, even if it's to be known as a great friendly guy. Hey, how you doing?
You don't think people communicate because they're genuinely concerned about the other person, they want to know about them? You don't think that?
But the concern is happening, and that person's feeling concern, and they want to get rid of the concern by finding out about the situation.
Well, they're just generally interested in this other person.
They're interested, and it will feel like a positive thing to them to ask them questions, because if that person isn't interesting and is boring, the person will walk away.
Well, if it's just stimulating them.
Again, we're sensory beings, and everything. We're drawn towards things that we enjoy, and we're repelled by things that we don't like.
Yeah.
And we use our communication. Sometimes humans are, when it comes to communication, we're so skillful. We can use touch and smiley faces, and it's all to get things that we want, and that could involve everyone. You may be happy because everyone's happy. It could involve everyone being happy, but it's still driven by your own motivations, and you're communicating to get those things that you want, or to try and change the environment. Yeah. It could be very positive things, but you're still doing it because you're motivated.
And it could be altruistic, but you're doing it because you're motivated.
And altruistic people only go so far. People only give so much to charity. They don't give everything to charity and live in a box, because they'd feel more uncomfortable if they gave all their wealth away. So you only give up to a point that you feel most people up to a point you feel. So it's not really altruism. It's wanting to be a good person. It's I want to be a good person, so I'll give this amount away.
There's a lot of that as well, but I do think there is genuine altruism in the world where it's not carried out to receive anything or even acknowledge. Just because you have empathy for that person and you want to help them.
Yeah.
I think that exists.
Well, there's
good about myself. I'm just touched by that person's plight, and I can do something to help them without me feeling good about myself.
But you're still, you're doing it and another person's not doing it. You're doing it because you're getting different feelings from doing it.
Am I though? Am I? Because I'm just quite touched. I'm quite emotional about what they're going through, and I can help them out by just doing a simple thing for them. So why wouldn't I do it?
And you also help yourself out by making yourself feel better by doing it. You said at the start, you're touched by what's going on. That's what motivates you to do something. We can't operate in we're feeling things, and we can't help but feel things when we do things. And and it's great if people are motivated to feel good about their kindness. That's a good thing. It's great that people are motivated to feel. But I think for anyone to stand up, any spiritual, anyone, and say, I'm not doing this for myself, I'm doing it for other people. Why are you? But you're doing it, you're feeling from it.
I was thinking maybe it's something spontaneous where you didn't have time to think about it, and you just did because it was the right thing to do, and you could do, and you had the tools or the skills to help at that precise moment, but you didn't have time to really think it through in your mind. I'll do that, and I'll be a nice guy and I'll feel good about that, rather than just think, he needs that, there you go, and walk away, and there's no ego involved in what you've just done. You're just done because you could, and it's the right thing to do.
Well, you think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, you think it's the right thing to do. Well, if a man's hungry and you've got too much food and you give him a bit of food, surely that's the right thing to do, isn't it?
Oh, I 100%, and I do it, and I hope other people would do it. But
without feeling, oh, I'm a great guy, you know.
yeah, there's some food. Hey, no worries, no need to thank me. That's fine. I'm doing it for you. I'm not doing it for you. I don't know.
There's a bit of legal denial in a lot of it.
There is. It's an interesting one. It shouldn't stop people from doing, because there's all sorts of other reasons for doing kind things.
Yes,
yeah.
But the mere fact they're doing it in the first place, I think, is a good thing.
It's 100%. It's a good thing. Yeah.
If everybody did it, then there wouldn't be people going without needs and being hungry and nowhere to stay.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to be motivated to do a wee bit though, and when you have multi-million welfare systems, you know, nobody knows who's being looked after, who's scamming. When you have a multi-million welfare system, it's done by numbers, it's not done by human relationships. If welfare was done on a local basis where you'd know that that person needed help, so they'd be able to get, but you'd know that person was a scammer. So you wouldn't, the scammer, if it was locally organised, wouldn't get the money, which would mean more money to help people. But when these multi-million welfare systems, they're just an absolute nightmare. So people withdraw because they don't know if the beggar in the street is actually on 5 welfare checks.
Running his Rolls Royce at the weekend.
Well, exactly. Whereas if welfare was organised locally, we'd all know exactly who needed help, and we know the reasons for it, and it would be a human relationship that would always be there. Even if the system changed, once a human relationship is rather than it just being it's deliberately, the welfare system, the people who operate, it's deliberately structured so that they don't have a relationship with the people that they.
Yeah, it's clinical.
Yes, totally.
But if it's local, as you say, you probably know the person. You know.
Yeah, we'd be able to, and people would know, right? It's up to us. There's nobody over there now helping, or we're making the assumption of helping. It's up to us. So it's, you know, if the guy that's managing common ground in your community at that particular point in time lives down the road, he's not going to screw everyone over if he's the community guy. Whereas when you've got strangers looking after your communities, then
and he's answerable as well.
He is.
He knows them.
Yeah.
So with centralised systems, you don't know. Like I asked people when the Brexit thing came along, and I asked the people who voted to stay in Europe, and I said, "Oh, was that an informed choice to stay in Europe then? Do you think?" Yeah, of course it's an informed choice. I said, "Do you know who the president of the EU is?" No. I said, "Well, do you know there's more than one president of the EU?" No. So you're voting for a system that you think you're informed about. You don't even know who runs it. And you're voting for that.
Yeah. And you can never be truly informed about an organisation that you've never been part of.
Especially if you're following it through the mainstream media.
Well, exactly. Again, organisations, we've all worked in, they only communicate things that benefit them. Any public announcement by an organisation is managed and controlled so that they don't lie, but so that things that happen are presented in a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's the clever thing about propaganda. It's like if you're watching Match of the Day, you can have 2 football managers looking at the same foul or the same incident and come up with completely different opinions. It's very easy to not mention certain things and only mention things that happened, but present it in a way that it gives the picture that you want, and that is actually very different. Without lying, it's very different.
We're just talking about the propaganda and how the British people believe it so much. In other countries, maybe East Germany, Russia, North Korea, it's maybe more obvious, the state control and censorship. But here I think it's more subtle.
Yeah.
And because it's more subtle, people think it's not going on.
Yeah. It's because British people view their institutions as higher spiritual institutions of freedom, whereas I think Russians and East Germans, you hear a lot of them, after the Cold War, they were then presented with a completely different picture about the world. So they realised that the picture that they'd been presented by the authorities they'd been told a lie, and now they were being presented with a completely different picture. So they've seen that the state can lie and that the authorities can lie, but whereas the British have never seen that.
No.
And I was in China during a lot of the disputes between China and Japan, and the Chinese were just whipped up into this anti-Japanese hate. And apparently it got a bit much, so the reporting and the information suddenly stopped because the authorities were getting a bit worried that the population was getting too agitated. And as soon as the media stopped pushing this anti-Japanese thing, people died down. Humans are affected. And British people would be able to look at that and say, well, the Chinese are crazy believing their state news channel, but most British people believe their state news channel.
But I'd say it's even more than that. It's mass manipulation. People being manipulated en masse.
Oh, 100%.
To hate another country.
Oh.
And the Japanese will be getting the same propaganda to hate the Chinese.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they did during the Cold War between Russia and here.
Yeah.
You know, I remember getting government propaganda videos to hide under your desk when the bomb comes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Russian people were getting the same about us.
Oh, 100%. It's propaganda collective style. It's making one, even though there's only individuals. No, and I said to a few of the have you ever actually met a Chinese person? That you hate them all.
Yeah.
It's that emotional development of a population that's required for fear, for control, for imposing restrictions on their civil liberties, and for getting a group of people to leave their families, businesses and local communities and go and fight and die hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
You need that collective emotion of anger against another collective to...
You're right, it's an emotion, isn't it, to get people emotionally involved.
Yeah.
Because I remember somebody saying to me after the Iraq War, "Oh, the British people never stand for another war." I says, "Are you kidding me?" I says, "All it will take is to get a white Christian church blown up with children in it and blaming a Muslim. Now you watch British people then go, go get them, invade them, because we're so easily manipulated."
People are...
Did you hear? Have you heard Edward Bernays?
Yes, who's he again? I have heard the name.
Freud's cousin. The tobacco company in America wanted. This is how we can be manipulated en masse so easily. The tobacco company during the 19th century, beginning of the 19th century, women didn't normally smoke. It was just working women, street women who smoked. You know, sophisticated women never smoked. So they thought, how do we get the women to smoke?
Oh yes, I have. Yeah.
So they employed Edward Bernays to come over from Russia, from Austria.
To America, New York, was it?
Yeah, New York. So he gathered a lot of sophisticated women, film stars, and photographed them with this elegant cigarette holders, and paid them a lot of money to do that. And then within weeks, the whole nation of women were smoking. And that's how you see women manipulated.
And people don't notice. When you look back in old films, everyone's got the same haircuts and they look silly and they're dressed the same. Fashion and haircuts, we all are changing and looking the same and thinking the same without ever realising what's going on. This mass development of thinking, of looks, of hairstyle, of musical tastes, of everything. We are collectively programmed beings, and that collective influence is never noticed. You can only... And it's generally only by looking back in time and seeing old photographs. Oh gosh, everyone did look different back then, and we haven't noticed this change, but it's happening. Yeah. And the whole if we were watching 1930s German films of a movie of a Gestapo agent called Kurt Bond on the Führer's service, and it was this swashbuckling Gestapo agent drinking martinis, you'd see it for propaganda. You'd see the 1930s German propaganda pushing forward the Gestapo as being these elegant... But our James Bond movies, that is basically making out the secret police to be these great, exotic, beautiful... And British people can't see the propaganda in their secret police being presented this way. They just can't. They'd be able to see it in other cultures and other times, but their own culture, totally blind to it.
Love your servitude and your slave masters.
Exactly. And we don't realise, people know that horror films are fiction, but they're still scared by it. People view Tom Cruise as this action guy, even though he's an actor. When people see images of things, of police being presented, of government officials, of MI5 agents being presented in a certain way, they emotionally believe it. That's why people worship movie stars, because they emotionally believe the images that they've been... Even when they know it's fiction. So when they don't know it's fiction, even though they don't know the images are truth, they have an emotional relationship with them, and they believe what's being presented. They control the image, and you control the mind, basically.
Yeah. And that's why I think Hollywood is a huge part of propaganda.
And it always has been. Movies always, from when they first came around, always have been.
I had a good quote from somebody that said, people love the propaganda, especially when it's given to them in entertainment.
Yeah.
And they'll defend it and they'll love it.
Yeah. And how many movies these days are about spies? They're all about spies. You never see what MI5 or CIA or Mossad are doing in the papers.
The bad things.
You just never see anything what they're doing, but... So if you were reading the newspapers, it's as if the spy industry doesn't exist. But if you're watching films, it's as if it's all the spy industry. And I think the film industry represents more accurately what's going on, how big the secret police, military intelligence are the players in these games. Money, oil, water, but also the military intelligence, and most humans are blind to what their secret police are doing. Completely blind. They don't think it's relevant what a secret police organisation are doing. They're doing something. Look at those big offices. They're not sitting there playing solitaire. They have huge budgets. They're doing things.
It's not for the people. They're not there for the people.
No.
And I read that every newspaper and every radio station, TV station has a member of the Secret Service on it.
Yeah.
To make sure that things don't go out and things don't get reported on.
Well, I think it was it William Casey, the CIA boss? He said, "We'll have achieved our aims once everything the American people believe is false."
Yes.
Military agencies are about deception. Mossad's motto is by deception. That's why when you have these big organisations who say to people, "We're all about deception," and people blindly believe what they're told. It's quite incredible. Again, it's the duckling imprinting. It's what you believe. What you're told when you're a kid, you will believe as if it's fact, unless you actually go back and do the whole exercise again and critically analyse what you were told as a child when you weren't in a position to critically analyse.
How does one go from that brainwashing to go into a critical state of questioning that?
By viewing every human being as the same and not viewing, if you meet a group of skinheads in the street and they tell you something, you should be as discerning and disbelieving about what they say as any other group of human beings. You must understand that all communication is done for a reason, or else the human being or organisation wouldn't be communicating. That I want, they're communicating to advance their interest, and you must recognise that with all communication. It's human apes, it's human beings, there's no God, there's no... People throughout history have just swapped one group of human beings as having high authority, whether it's the pharaoh, the emperor, the king, the priest, the politician. They've just, depending on what they've been brought up with, to believe that this group of strangers are truthful, divine, honest beings that have a right to control them. Each group of human beings has a different authority figure based on what they've been brought up with. They're all equally false. Priests will lie even though they say they're men of God. And to believe that priests are a higher spiritual group is false. To believe that your government is a higher spiritual group, again, it's a bunch of hairy, sweaty, pissy, shitty, shagging apes. So that's how you be discerning, by viewing all communication and all people with the same critical light. Not disbelieving them, but not believing them until you can actually prove it yourself. Have no heroes or greater authority. And that's not being irrational, it's being completely irrational. It's not denying things or being weird.
It's discerning.
Yeah, it's being equal and constant with everyone, and understanding that even good people lie, because people sometimes lie to stop other people getting hurt, or they lie because they don't like who they are and they're trying to... Humans lie. Communication is about presenting, not truth, but about presenting what's going on in a way that advances the communicator's interest. Even us sitting here, we're trying to, in one way or another, we're trying to... If we weren't trying to advance our interests, we'd be sitting at home doing nothing. So all communication is about, and lots of it's for good reasons, but people must always recognise that's what communication is. There's no gospel, there's no holy word from a human being, ever. And whether you think it comes in a magic book or your state news channel giving you holy word, both are equally wrong. And it seems natural to be human and believe higher authority, because again it comes back to the child. A big part of the problem with humans is that we were kids. The first X years of our life we were children. We had to trust and we had to follow. That's why humans can be very easily managed by other human beings in authority. Very easily managed.
So were you ever exposed to religion or attending church or anything?
No, I was a hardcore atheist for a real fundamentalist atheist for the first 30 years of my life.
Were your parents atheists or?
Kind of. Not really anything. Nothing was pushed on me at all. No, it wasn't. Yeah, there was no spiritual heritage.
That's good. I think it's great when parents aren't pushing anything on you about their beliefs that you decide for yourself.
And when you're brought up in an environment that you have Christianity and believing in a book and someone that was around 2,000 years ago, and then you're presented with a better alternative, something that seems more rational. If you're a child and the only two models that come with adult authority are atheism and Christianity, a lot of people will jump into atheism and jump into it with both feet and say, well, that's obviously right, not realising that there may be other models out there that you can't say that the better of two models is truth. It's just the better of two models. So I think in our and then the other angle you take is, well, I can't decide between the two of them, which is agnotism. But that doesn't mean there's not other. I think there'll be a lot of agnostics who are very open-minded, but I think a lot of agnostics it's just I can't decide between Christianity and atheism, rather than saying are there actually any other models? Some of the Eastern spirituality models, for example.
Yeah.
So that's why you get radical atheists, because they feel they've found the truth, because they've turned away from the weirdness of a lot of Christian beliefs. But believing that a magic hole appeared magically and then spouted forth a magic universe of hydrogen atoms that then came together and started singing, dancing and laughing. And to have a condition of faith, something, an effect without cause, a thing appearing by magic, an effect without cause, to have that as a foundation stone of your belief and plant your belief flag and say, I believe this. That's the foundation of your belief, that a magic hole appeared out of nowhere.
Well, that is the Big Bang, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. People have faith in something that happened 12 billion years ago because other people with authority have told them about it.
Yeah. When you put it like that, it is pretty illuminating, isn't it? How bizarre that is, and mad that people blindly believe that.
No, it's fair. If you've got an environment that you don't know in business and anywhere, you say, okay, I don't know this environment, so I'll consider different models and I'll apply percentages. That's what open-minded people should do. Consider all the models and think about them. As soon as you say, I am an atheist or a Christian, you're cloaking yourself in an identity. You're defining yourself by an intellectual hypothesis, and by doing that, you're closing your mind. Rather than saying, right, here are all the models, what percentages do I apply in this mysterious environment? That's what a rational person should do. Not, I am now this, I believe this. Because we are mysterious. What this is a mystery. So.
Yeah, but when you describe that as this identity where you claim you're this, to me, it causes division. Because as soon as you claim you're a Christian, you're not really interested in what the Muslim's going to say, and the Muslim's not interested in what the Christian's going to say. So there's a division there.
Yeah.
And for me, I really do believe division causes conflict, and conflict leads to war.
Yeah.
Now, when I meet you, if I don't say I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim, I'm just a human being.
Yeah.
And that belief is my personal belief, and I'm not going to let it come between us.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But I just see so much division with people's identities and beliefs, and nationalism and political ideologies.
Well, as soon as you define yourself in a collective, you agree with strangers in that collective with what they say, even though you don't know them, and you disagree with strangers from another collective because you're defining yourself by the collective. Yeah. So even if you've got a fool and a crazy person in your collective, if that person gets hurt or says something, you're much more supportive because they're in your collective. So if a British person gets killed by a German person in the someone in my collective's been hurt, even though you may like the German person better than the person in your collective.
Or a disaster happens on the other side of the world, and two British people were, blah blah blah. What about the other people? Yeah. You don't even know the names. It's like all these children that are killed during the wars. We don't know any of their names, but we know every British soldier that dies in that illegal war.
Yeah, what about the 500,000 Iraqi children?
Yeah, it's obscene.
It's disgusting. I think the only identity one should have is with, and this should be a temporary thing, it's not a lifetime servitude, but to your local community. That's where you live, that's where you bring your children up, that's where you exist. Your local community should be the identity, not these massive collectives that are combined with lots of communities. And in a massive collective, some local communities benefit over other local communities. And here we are in Hamilton. I mean, can you imagine some locals from Hamilton going down to some of the City of London banquets? They're not in the same collective. A local guy from Hamilton is not in the same community as some of these City of London guys, but people in Hamilton are controlled by these other communities. Hello. And that's how privilege and abuse works. You entice other communities into a greater identity, and then you rob them blind.
Yeah.
And they, whether it's a king dominating people or a lord dominating people, you get them into the group, and then the individual or the community with power can then influence the systems of power to their benefit, to the detriment of poor, and that's why poor communities have been poor and will, in my opinion, will continue to remain poor for generations. People keep giving their money away to complete strangers and expect those strangers to look after their interests. Local communities have to start looking after their own interests. It's the only way that poor communities will be able to end this perpetual cycle of poverty. Do we expect these poor communities that have been poor for generations to get rich using the same system? With a family of parasites living there with
It's a system that disempowers them, but yet I think using that system they're going to come out of that.
Yeah.
Probably, but never happen.
And you can drive through poor communities and see pictures of the Union Jack and...
Don't you find that they're usually the most patriotic?
They are.
I just find it bizarre, you know. I'm very disappointed. I get quite down when I see very impoverished people waving Union Jacks and being very patriotic and joining up to go and kill and die for these people.
It's a way for poor people to feel associated with a greater good, a greater glory. You know, poor people watching Kate Middleton in her gowns. Well, I think the collective psychology is that you feel that you're part of that. So a British sports person doing well, you feel you've done, or we did well. A British royal family, you're proud that there's a family of your people in your collective who are wealthy, and I think for poor people who don't have a lot, the false glory of associating with the collective and associating with other powerful people in the collective and successful people, and we've had great scientists from I've never invented anything, but there's been great Scottish scientists. I've never met them. So I think the less you have, the more prone you are to associate with these things and make yourself feel better with the greater glory of. And your history has been that. Your history has been your fathers and grandfathers have gone off to strange lands and left their businesses and families and gone and fought. So the whole working class culture is living, working, literally working for powerful people. That's what working class history has been. These poor people as slaves on lands, on their lord's land. That is the whole history of the British working class, and they still feel that way.
It's still that way, but it's more sophisticated.
Well, it's more
subtle.
It evolves and it changes for the changing times. But once you have central banking, you have a plantation of human beings whose very existence is benefiting another group of human beings.
But I don't think we need an identity to be living to the full and to make the most of our lives. In fact, I think there's a lot of freedom about not having a sense of identity and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, there is. You're your own person, and you're not affected by the views and beliefs and emotions of other people. I think from an organisational point, you can live on your own, but if you truly lived on your own, you'd have a very basic life. We forget how much we rely on other people for everything we get, and in an economic, organisational point of view, having a trusted identity. I think order shouldn't come through force of the state. It should become with people supporting trusted organisations and people in their communities and businesses. So having an identity from an organisational point of view does make sense, but from living your life as a happy human being, then it's perfect. And what's a name? A name is just a sound that's associated. The sound that's associated with me is Cameron. It's just a sound. I'm actually not Cameron. That is the sound that's associated with me. Yeah. And my name is just a few squiggles and lines that people now recognise as being associated with
it. It had nothing to do with you. You didn't choose it.
I'm not Cameron.
It was bestowed upon you.
So yes. I think it's better to actually try and develop a philosophy of how you act and interact with other people rather than an identity. Because if you become any part of collective, unless you're the gang leader, fair enough if you're in a collective and you're the person in charge, that is actually quite rational. But to be in a collective and you and your family are down at the bottom, what you're doing. Shouldn't your family, your business, and your community come first? Shouldn't it? Shouldn't it always? Why sacrifice your prosperity and even your lives supporting a collective?
And also your own thinking as well, because you succumb to the group think, don't you? You go along with the dominant thought of that group.
Very natural. And organisations have developed groupthink. That's why I think it could be very healthy, although in our society it's viewed as weird, to separate yourself for a while, to think based on reason and fact and not be affected by the wild, at times crazy shrieks and opinions of other people. I think you can find the right way of being and doing through reason and fact. You don't actually... I think you can sit in your cave and come to correct conclusions because you're basing it not on what other people are saying and not on what's come before, but just based on what we are and reason. So you don't need necessarily... You need to educate yourself to understand how to work tools and processes, but in terms of understanding what is the decent path, I think you can come to that through your own quiet contemplation about what we are and what natural rights each of us can and can only have, which is nobody can be the property of their neighbour. Nobody can make their neighbour their property in any way, and the principle has to be free of all compromise to mean anything, or else it's just another form of dictatorship that may be palatable, of ownership of one human being owning another. It may be palatable given the current climate, but when it comes down to it, you can only believe in freedom if it's a pure principle. You can only talk about freedom if it's a pure principle, that no human being has any property rights over another human being. And who can argue with that? We're mortal, we're piles of dust that are animated for a while and then go back into the earth. To suggest that a mortal being can have authority over another mortal being, we've been brainwashed by millennia of dictatorship, unfortunately, into believing these collectives are natural and decent and good. They're psychologically damaging to lower caste people, economically damaging to lower caste people, making people think their local dialect is somehow lesser than another dialect, making people think their school, their communities, their heritage. It's damaging on all levels, and we won't have... I think we'll only realise how damaging it's been once. Just like you couldn't, if you were a German in the 1930s, you couldn't really see what's happening. It's only once you get past and are able to look back, we'll only be able to see the craziness and the mentalness of having a collective put in place by humans who demanded that their neighbours called them majesty and bow to them. You know, that's chimpanzee strategies. Bow down to me, neighbour. Call me majesty, neighbour. And here we are, hundreds of years, continuing a despicable tradition that was put in place through force and through intimidation and through gangsterism. It's gangster traditions that we've continued and view as decent and as how free human beings should behave and interact, and it's totally, completely wrong. Well, I think once you start, to say the earth isn't a spinning ball is the height of insanity in our culture. And once you have opened your mind to the fact we're not on a super fast spinning ball, magically spinning forever, careering through space, then you have to doubt the other things that are also viewed as crazy if you challenge them. I'm not saying lots of Jews died in the Second World War, treated terribly. That's not in doubt. But given what we know about the BBC and given what we know about these things that you're viewed with ridicule if you challenge, you have to challenge those things now. Once you wake up to one area, you have to look with a critical eye on every area, including... And not that we'll ever know, that's the thing, John, we will never know the truth about these things that happened in the past, ever. There's not going to be a photograph found of a Rothschild beside the printing press with illegal printing press. Oh, I've been caught. There's never, ever going to be that moment. There's always going to be hypothesis about what happened in the past, which is another reason why we shouldn't let people dominate us, because we never will ever know what's actually going on in another room with people when we're not there. Even if they tell us what's going on, we still don't know what went on, ever. So all these conspiracy theorists looking for conspiracy of power, they're never going to actually find the smoking gun that conclusively proves it, that they can show everyone, because we weren't there. And even if one of the Rothschilds comes out and sits down for 3 days telling truth, is that truth?
Even
We'll never know.
No, even the people writing the history books.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't there at the time.
Well,
you know?
yeah.
So second-hand information that they're putting down.
History's not a factual subject.
No.
Of course it's a fact that there's a castle there, but the intrigue and the political machinations behind it we'll never know. We'll never know. And I know particularly people who are into the Scottish independence, and many of them have woken up to the bias of the BBC.
Yes,
But they still won't go back and or it's not about going back, but they'd still not even be willing to consider the things that they've been told by the BBC the rest of their life about the wars, about history.
Yeah, this is an isolated case.
Oh yeah, they're lying then, but it's crazy to think they'd be lying at any other times. The problem with the voting slip is it doesn't have an abstain box. I think if it had an abstain box, and that's why you're always voting for the shiniest turd. You're not voting for the greatest person in Britain. You're voting for 2 or at most 3 political gangs. So it's always the shiniest turd. And I suppose people, most people do have a feeling of they should contribute to the greater community, and voting is viewed as your contribution to the greater community, even if you don't agree with everyone. To not vote is viewed like you're letting down freedom, whereas all voting is being counted like cattle. Imagine instead of going into your own little pen and putting your hoof mark, that they had 3 big pens, one for the Tories, one for Labour, one for Lib Dem, and all of us like cattle, 1 a header, 2 a header, 3 a header, 4, into these 3 big pens, and then a drone would go over counting the forehead, counting the cross on our forehead. Count me, beep, that's freedom for you. I've been counted like cattle in a pen. And you get the same result as we get with our current voting process. It's people being counted like head of cattle to put in charge a leader in a system that is in actual fact a regime that has been hard-coded. The central bank's been hard-coded, the secret police have been hard-coded, the land ownership rights have been hard-coded. It's a regime that is hard-coded, and then people can choose the leader, and no leader is going to get rid of the Bank of England or change things. And they view it as freedom.
Because that's his employers.
Well, yeah, exactly. And they can. I reckon if a politician actually did come in and seriously challenge the Bank of England, they wouldn't last very long.
No.
But they wouldn't even get to that position of power in the first place.
I think how much we've been brainwashed is that the politicians aren't in charge, it's the bankers that are in charge. But they fooled us into thinking that these puppets in government, they take all the flack, while the bankers sit in the background, smoking their cigars, thinking, they think it's them in charge. No, we're in charge.
They must love it.
We control the money, you fools.
They must feel like daddy gangsters.
Yeah, aye.
I think it's called a cryptocracy. Rule by secret.
Yeah. And it's like a monopoly board for them. They're watching reality of this game turn out in front of them, but they're in control of it. Yeah. It's an illusion of choice if you're going to vote.
Yeah, it's the left-right paradigm, the illusion of choice, but you're not really. Whoever controls the money
yes,
to control the population.
As Rothschild said. Yeah.
Governments are all in debt to these people.
Yeah.
And these people could close the government down by stopping the money flow. Yes. Who's in charge? Yes. Same with the business. I worked in a business and things were tight, and we had the bankers come in, and we had to raise loans on the strength of our debtors and raise loans on the strength of our assets. We weren't in charge of that business anymore. We couldn't make any structural change to the business because the bankers effectively were in charge, and that's the state of of all governmental organisations. They're in debt, not to their own financial system, but to a private banking system, so they're not in charge. And anyone who thinks a lower caste human can get into the power of prime priest or president, and actually that be the most powerful human in the world, just as clueless to actually how power really works.
They're trying to portray Tony Blair as the working class man from Scotland, for God's sake.
He went to Fetties.
I know, private education.
And Fetties as well, the school of the establishment.
Prestigious school,
Well, Fetties in the new town in Edinburgh were set up for the ruling classes to manage the empire. Edinburgh and London are the 2 financial centres and the 2 centres. It's why Edinburgh is viewed as a English city by many Scots because it was the centre of the... Even the new town is set up with calling its kings and queens. It was a city for the establishment, where the establishment was schooled, which is why Edinburgh's still got one of the highest rate of public school ratios. I think it's 25% of Edinburghers go to public school. Because
25%?
Yeah, allegedly. I heard that, I've never researched it. It was the centre of the establishment. So yeah, the idea that Tony Blair was a man of the people, ridiculous.
Oh.
But it's all slogans, isn't it? Our politics today is a big bun fight with different groups trying to influence the central point of power, using slogans to advance their aims.
But they always use the slogan like change now. Now, I associate it like goldfish. Now, why is it every 4 years there's a change? Well, the first year you're really happy that you've voted the people in and there's going to be change. The second year comes and you start to question, where is this change? So it doesn't come the second year. The third year comes, where's this bloody change? It's never came.
Yeah.
They've broken all the promises. So people get a bit restless. And then it comes in the fourth year, they've demanded change. And then the cycle starts all over again. Oh, we've got change, great. But they never do get change.
No, they don't.
But they're fooled into thinking they get change.
Yeah.
And it's like goldfish think, give them 4 years. Because it's just about, that's enough to keep them going with a lie.
Yeah.
And then they get dissatisfied. So to stop a revolution, change it every 4 years.
Yeah. Exactly. And things can only get better.
Yes,
It's a new dawn. No, it's not. It's exactly the same system with some other bloke in the cockpit of a plane that's effectively flying itself.
Yeah. Just change that image of a new person.
Yeah.
Keep the same old politics. They won't know the difference.
Yeah.
They won't know it's just change the face.
Exactly. And as long as a political leader stands up and says, I'm going to do this, words are just sounds made by an ape throat. They mean words are worth nothing, but people, if a politician stands up and says they're going to do something, as you say, that will do them for a few more years. And how, even in a small organisation, it's hard to make change, because to make change you have to take power away from powerful people. That's the only way change can come about. You have to change the power structure, which means taking power, which is a problem in a small organisation and it's a problem in a big organisation. And it's an interesting thing about private banking. Do we march down there? People have the right to use the Bank of England's money. People have the right to do anything they want. The problem is that we're being forced culturally and sometimes legally to use the monopoly money. So the solution is to create our own, rather than people have the right to do whatever they want. So it's not about being crazy and going out and smashing down the old systems. It's about trying to, in parallel, create new systems and speak about the ideas and about the sense of nobody should be the property of their neighbour, and the sense of only local communities have the interest and motivation to truly look after their own prosperity. Another tangent is this thing on humans expect being influenced by simple sound bites and slogans. For example, the minimum wage. It does sound a great thing. I mean, it really does sound a great thing that there's no more low-paid workers. But what does the legislation actually do? It bans low-skilled people from the jobs market. If you had the minimum wage at £1,000 an hour, how many people would be banned? So that principle works at any level. Now, at £6 an hour, it's the long-term unemployed and the youth. It's the low-skilled people that are banned. And where do we have a problem? Long-term unemployed and youth. Imagine a guy getting out of jail after 20 years and he's trying to look for employment. There's no way a company is going to be tied into a 6-month contract and pay that guy £6 an hour. I understand that people may think that the living wage should be £6. So what you do is you don't impose your will on firms and say no more economic activity under this level. Because remember, supply and demand. If you make something more expensive, its demand goes down. If you make employment more expensive, its demand goes down. Why not help people? Let this guy who's just got out of jail have a very casual contract. All you need is a couple of weeks to prove your honesty and your ability to work. Let him earn £3 an hour. And civil society comes in and makes up the shortfall. Don't ban low-skilled people from the jobs market. Let low-skilled people get the job, because a company's not going to pay out £6 an hour to somebody for 6 months when they can only get £3 for. That's how companies go out of business. If you pay people more than you get from them, you'll go out of business. So let these engines of prosperity operate within law. They don't have any more. A company doesn't have any more rights than an individual. But come in, and you're only earning £3. Great that you've got a job. Great that you're proving yourself. Great that you're building your CV. We'll come in and we'll make up the shortfall. But don't ban that guy. Don't make it the minimum wage £6, because then the poor guy who's only got a skill level of £3 an hour is not going to get a job. And when you've got a minimum wage, what you see is everyone in employment's earning £6 an hour. But that's the same as if you made the minimum wage £1,000 an hour. Everyone in employment is on £1,000 an hour. Yeah, but there's only 3 people in employment. Everyone in employment is on £6 an hour, but you're forgetting about the long-term unemployed and the low-skilled and the youth who have been banned from the job market, and they're just completely ignored. But people fall for the slogan, oh yeah, minimum wage, everyone's got to earn £6 an hour, and don't actually realise what the legislation's doing, and don't realise the consequences. The people that aren't counted anymore, that have been banned because their skill level is not at it's a threshold. It's a skill. The minimum wage is a skill threshold, and if you've not got the skills to compete, it's like imposing a skill level in a sporting arena. You just ban the low-skilled people. You don't actually make the game more skillful. You just ban low-skilled people from the game, so you don't see them anymore. So I understand a lot of these socialist aims, but they can't come from legislation, because legislation is actually just force and it has unintended consequences. You come in and you help people. You know, everyone should have a certain standard of living, fine, but don't ban things that aren't that. Come in and try and, in a voluntary way, bring people up to the level that we want to aspire to. So all these socialist policies are absolute disaster, even though they, on the surface and in a simplistic sense, seem to help people. They don't, and they always actually end up damaging the people that don't have a voice. But even in right-wing economics papers, everyone's talking. In America, they're talking about putting up to $10 an hour. And a great example is Costa Rica. Costa Rica is the same minimum wage level as America. Because it's a more lower skilled environment, the unemployment's greater because more people have been banned from the jobs market. Britain can defend itself. There's no need for British soldiers to go abroad. We should be focusing on our own prosperity, our own clubs, our own businesses, our own communities, rather than this waste of money going abroad. And it's insanity, isn't it?
And it shouldn't be called the defence department. It should be called the attack department.
Offence budget.
Yeah, offence.
Well, the Ministry of Defence was set up as the Ministry of War. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It has no place in among decent human beings, like the secret police has no place among decent human beings. Like a privileged family, I think Elizabeth Windsor's the biggest landowner in the world.
Yeah.
To have that in place and you still hear lower caste people saying they're free, as examples of propaganda go, Britain will be held up as one of the great examples.
I think it's one of the most propagandised countries in the world.
It was the empire. Yeah. Britain was British people can't see that their system was a despicable, horrible, caste-ridden empire with a white elite viewing all other races, including their own race. You know, the white elites in Britain have looked down their noses at the lower castes in Britain. And especially about the Scots as well. Yeah. To be used as cannon fodder in their empire. Well, the Scots are so proud. 25% of us used to be in the army. No. That's because we were poor and we were used as cannon fodder. Yeah. It's not something to be proud of. No. Why shouldn't Scots have been looking after their own community? Not giving to those people in London, looking after their own. Why give all your surplus away to other communities when your community is poor? Why not keep it for your own community? Like in Hamilton, imagine if everyone in Hamilton stopped giving away to London and actually total focus on Hamilton. It would be a different place. And it's a sad state of affairs that people believe and have an allegiance to a false concept like a big collective rather than something real like their family and local community where they exist. That's the brainwashing for you. But it can make a direct impact. Absolutely. Where they're living. That's their environment. You know, people say in Hamilton will hardly ever go to other British cities. Why? They should focus on their place, on their people, on their community, and not in isolation. This isn't about becoming isolated. Well, if you want to start a small community that's isolated, it's up to you, but generally people don't want to be isolated, but they should take responsibility to look after themselves and share all the best ideas and processes with other communities, and share one of the big issues is how you share the utility, rivers and trains.
Yes.
And that's a challenge, admittedly, but
it's all been privatised, isn't it?
Yeah, what should have happened in privatisation is that the proceeds should have been given out to the taxpayers. You've paid national insurance for 20 years, okay, you get this share. That's what should have happened. Privatisation, if a group of people have paid for an asset when it's sold off that group of people, so it should have been paid out to the taxpayers of Britain. That would have been a fair privatisation, but instead it wasn't. It's cultural arrogance, John. It's believing that the Brits are always... You know, I was brought up with comics of British and American commandos. I've forgotten what they were called, these little war
Commando.
You know, these brawny guys killing these horrible Japs and Krauts, and that's what I was. There's this belief that the Brits, your culture is the good guys, and even the elites in your culture are looking after your interests. So it's cultural blindness into thinking that powerful people who speak your language, and more importantly, who speak with a higher caste. You know, it wasn't that recently that people would tug the forelock to the bank manager or to the higher caste person or to the person who spoke with a posher accent to them.
50s.
Yeah, 50s. In many people's memories. And we still have that attitude. We believe what people with their lovely higher caste accents who are communicating through these organisations of authority, we believe blindly what they say. We don't view them in the same way as if some rough guy came up to us in the street and was telling, and we should view it in exactly the same way because they're human beings.
But I think it all stems from how we view ourselves. Even the word United Kingdom, calling it a kingdom,
Kingdom.
Yes.
You're being dominated by one of your neighbours. Imagine if your next door neighbour suddenly started calling him king and had you bow, and imagine going to a village and all the villagers were bowing to this family and scraping, and that family was... You'd think they were a bunch of cult-ridden idiots. A small community and a large community, decency never changes. British people are cult-ridden idiots.
I quite agree with that.
Bowing down to another human being. They're not God. There's nothing majestic about another human being.
Another human being who has not democratically been voted in.
Yeah. Well, even if all my other neighbours had put a cross in a box choosing some other human being, it would mean the same thing to me personally. But to be honest, whether my neighbours put crosses in boxes or do a wee dance saying "Can we own you," or it's irrelevant to me. You always hear that posher, I don't like using that word, but let's just use it, are more confident. The psychological damage of bringing a wee child up thinking that their dialect is lower caste, their school is lower caste, their community is lower caste. We've never actually really studied the psychological damage of that before, because most people haven't ever thought that it's actually a happening. We view other castes as a caste system, other worse castes, but never our own.
Yes.
But I know quite a few people in Leith, and people who speak like that, they're not going to go up to some of these merchant banks and get a job. Their dialect's the wrong dialect. It's a caste system.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't exist if communities looked after them. Ethnic division would disappear if local communities looked after themselves, because a lot of ethnic division comes from, you have this big collective full of all different types of people, and they're all fighting for their interest to change the central power of pot. So you're always, when you have a multi-million collective with different types in it, you'll always have conflict, because it's a big bun fight to change the central point of power. The magic book that writes the rules, we've got to change the magic book for our interest. Whereas if communities had their own power, ethnic division would disappear, religious division would disappear, because you don't have these people aren't fighting to influence the central point of power. Philosophy and reason has taken over. Nobody can be their neighbour's property. That's the rule. and then we can form voluntary communities that can look after themselves. All the division would disappear. It's a bit like what happened in Africa. The colonials went there and split the countries, not by tribal lines, but by other lines, and forcing these tribes into countries. That's exactly what happens in other places in different ways. You have these different groups who view themselves differently, all fighting. And you get one group in charge, like Zimbabwe, you get some of the other countries, you get one tribe in charge because it's a multi-million collective. And a central point of power will only ever have one ideology. You won't get this Star Trek idea of all these different types in this central point of power. A central point of power only ever has one true ideology and is ruled by one group because it's one office. It's one small group of human beings, and as we were talking, they get groupthink, they become institutionalised into a certain way of thinking. Give communities the power, and all that division, all that bun fight, all feminists wanting this and gay people wanting that. They have rights, of course they do, but the right should be that each human being owns themselves and can't be the property of their neighbour. I could set up a group called Camism. I want skinny brown-haired people I want 20% of boards to have skinny brown-haired people on them. I want 20% of this to have skinny brown-haired. I'm only standing up for my interest. Feminism or gay militancy is people they're not standing up for a principle or philosophy. They're standing up for their group's right to influence the central point of power. And it naturally creates a divide and conquer environment. You've seen Life of Brian?
Yeah.
I call it the Judea's people front strategy. All these different groups fighting, and they all have gay people have a total right to do what they want with their body. A woman is equal in every way, apart from physically, obviously. Well, they're different physically. A woman is equal every way to a man. The principle should be that each human being has authority over their own property and body, not this group with this set of genitals wants that group with another set of genitals has, and this group with this sexuality wants that. It's nasty, 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 and it's getting worse and it's getting nastier. There's no philosophy, there's no decency. As ever, it's just a divide and conquer with different groups, left, right, black, white, Muslim, Christian, man, woman, all this big nasty bitch fight.
And just seems to be more and more groups developing.
There will be. As it becomes more splintered, it will be. And as the economy will go downhill, as it will, because you can't continue increasing debt exponentially forever. God knows where we're going. It smells of bad history, doesn't it?
But then it can still just keep printing the money out of thin air, though, couldn't it? So you could keep the debt going. Yeah, but at some point the bankers will own everything.
Well,
they do now, don't they?
Well, they own. Yeah, who knows how much they own.
I mean, however bad it gets, they just spend more money.
Yeah, it could continue going for a long time.
Yeah. Even if the debt goes 100 times what it is now, which it will do, you just spend hundreds more times cash.
Yeah. And that's why we shouldn't arm ourselves with pitchforks and go down, and we should just start creating alternative systems like Bitcoin. And it's an interesting idea. When people start talking about anti-government, it sounds terrifying, and it can lead to terrifying. But it's not about, right, we want to rip up everything and smash it. No, we don't. Nobody has the right to destroy someone else's property. And let's take the land squatters, the landed gentry. What would happen if people suddenly woke up to law, and as a community we now believed in law that no human being has the right to make their neighbour their property in any way? These landowners own their houses. We're not going to go with pitchforks and kick these poor people out. If we'd been brought up as a landed gentry, we'd be no different. They didn't put it in place. So applying law to the landed gentry, they own their houses. We were not going to go with pitchforks and kick those poor people out. They own their houses. Law applies equally to those people as to us. They own their houses, and they own enough land around it to give them privacy as a starting point. if anyone wants, if there's a local community that thinks it has, or a group of people that thinks it has a right to the landed gentry land, they don't go in violently and take it over. They use law. They go to institutions, independent institutions that have been set up to purely give opinion on law, with the principle of law being nobody has the right to make their neighbour their property. And this force should only come in two places: at the end of a legal process, or in red hot defence of your property when you're at the edge of your property. No getting pitchforks. It's not about judgment, it's not about anger. We've all been brainwashed, including the Windsor family, including the landed gentry, and we don't get violent. We use law and use it peacefully as far as we can. So that it's not rip up the old system, let's bring in chaos and see what happens. It's let's stop being unlawful and introduce the genuine philosophy of law, and we apply it. And poor man, rich man, black woman, Muslim man, we are all protected equally by law. Each of us has full sovereignty over our body and what we create. It's giving creation back to the created. And law has been talked about before. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. Not thou shalt not steal, brackets, unless some of your neighbours have put crosses and boxes beside your name, close brackets. Or unless your family is a royal family. It's thou shalt not steal from your neighbour. No, excellent. You know, people have the right to do what they want. People have the right to be in whatever cult or collective they want. I don't want to stand up and tell people what to do with their lives. All I have control over is my own mind and body. And when you approach me and start asking me questions, then I'm quite happy to start talking about it. I'm very wary of becoming angry or militant about any. I'd rather not get involved and just be peaceful and not angry and not agitated.
Peaceful daily insights? No?
At the moment I'm trying to progress my guitar playing and trying to learn programming so I can get involved with these. You know, I understand the philosophy and the ideas and the benefits, I think, quite well, but I need to understand how to build these things. And we've got limited time. You know, I played around with the idea. I never got a good hook into doing videos. So at the moment I think my guitar and programming and just sitting watching the birds outside and contemplating things should take precedent.
Good balance.
Yeah.
What guitar do you play? Acoustic or electric?
Acoustic, yeah. I only started about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's it's really difficult learning the guitar, but slowly I'm making progress and I love it.
Excellent.
But in a way I've seen myself as an activist, but a libertarian activist. I try and walk the decent path, don't give money to violent institutions, would support non-violent institutions that aren't built on force or collectivism or any sort of privilege, but are built on voluntary interaction where each human being is treated the same and has the same rights. See, the libertarian or anarchist viewpoint is always viewed as not believing in any cooperation or organisation. That's not true. Humanity has got where it is through communication and cooperation and organisation. They just believe that it can be done voluntarily with the unifying code that each person owns themselves and their property. It's not. I once said to somebody I was an anarchist, and then said, and I used to be an accountant. He said, how did that go together? It goes together fine. All an anarchist believe is that no one's got the right to forcefully collectivise their neighbour. So you can still be an accountant or a lawyer and be an anarchist. It's just not believing that any neighbour has the right over you, because there's no majesty there. It's only just humans.
But surely everybody can see the sentiment in that and agree with that.
And if they can, they may think, okay, well, the alternative could end up with blood on the streets, so maybe we should accept this servitude because it's the best we're going to get. And that's why I think people will only be brave enough to do things when they... And I don't like using the word spiritual, because we're either all spiritual or none of us are. But people have... Only when people start placing their principles of being a free human being and not having the heavy hand of their neighbour on their shoulder ahead of their materialistic things and safety will people start. And and most people have kids, so I think most people are completely loath. Fine, it's not perfect, but their kids are safe, and I can understand where they're coming from, and that's why, I don't have any kids, and I can do what I want with my life and be very radical, but I can understand why other people don't want to be radical. They're quite happy with. And if the financial system wasn't completely broken, that would make even more sense. But we are going for shit. We're heading for terrible times, I think. You can see it. You can just see it. Our civil liberties are being taken away. There's much more violence happening. There's constant war now in the Middle East. Bankers have been robbing us blind and are going to continue doing it. Oh, it's an obscenity. You see these people coming out of Boots with a big bag of drugs, and then reading about cannabis growers being put, I look at those bloody drug takers, good that they're being chucked in a cage, and they're coming out of a pharmacy with you realise you're buying drugs from drug dealers. It's the same thing.
Hypocrisy. And they go, these conscientious parents who go into the food stores and look at the labels, what ingredients they're giving to their children. They never look at the ingredients of vaccines or real side effects of drugs or what's in them. Yeah, even though they're toxic chemicals, they never look at the harm that's going to them.
You really should tread with caution when you put anything into your own body that wasn't made by you.
Especially as an artificial chemical.
Yeah, and that can't have been tested. People are putting so many different combinations of drugs into their bodies and everybody's different. At least with cocaine and cannabis, it's been done for generations. When you have a drug that's been taken by lots of people for generations, you develop there's side effects to these drugs, but at least you know that people have been taking it for generations. These new drugs and the combinations that people are taking, they're totally untested. Drugs companies have huge amounts of money. Who's funding all this research? Which independent group of people like us, medical research, the drug research, do the likes of you and I have money to research? No, it will be the drugs companies that are funding all these research. It has to be. It's the people with money. People who are motivated to get the conclusion from the report that whenever you look at research, you must always look at who's funding that research.
Yeah.
Always.
If you're going to pay them money, they're going to give you the result you want.
Yeah. It may come to the point where humanity goes back to growing all their own food in allotments and locally, and understanding that we can just never trust strangers. We need to make sure that we look after the important things, grow our own food, and there's a good chance that humanity will go back to that, and not this. We're also desperate to live as long as possible and look as good as possible. I think that's the wrong way of thinking. So we've become this hysterical. You look at tobacco packets and they've got pictures of people that, that's puritanical. If someone wants to buy tobacco, an adult wants to buy tobacco and smoke it, they should be allowed to. What next? Pictures of battered women on malt whiskey. If you're going to educate people, the point of sale is not the point to educate them. I have the right to buy a product from one of my neighbours and for no other person to come along and try and scare me or terrify me about my peaceful lifestyle choice. We're in a very puritanical society that has health, fascism and youth-orientated ideals at its core, where the body and how we look, don't do that, don't put that into your, no. Batter that person for taking that unhealthy thing, batter that person. It's health fascism.
It's try to pretend that they're conscientious and care about health, but then he's spraying our skies with chemicals and
exactly.
And all the chemicals in the food industry and things like horse meat slip in and donkey meat and they could give a shit about the people, and if they get ill, all the better, because they're going to make money out of their ills.
They're there to make money.
Absolutely.
And again, go back to the foundation stone of reason. Imagine a game of Monopoly played for centuries. What do you get? Total monopoly over all the institutions of power that are imported to control. Yeah, it's quite a thought, having woken up, believing that I was a free man and believing in institutions, and realising that hopefully this is just the latter end of the Middle Ages, where human owns human. where these systems of power of lord owning their neighbour and banker monopolising their neighbour, they're still in force. We're still at the latter. It's more technologically advanced, but we're still at the latter ages of the Middle, which is why we've still got Her Majesty and the Holy Hall of Westminster that's been there for hundreds of years still coming out with the Holy Word that allows one group of human beings to dominate their neighbour's body and property. It's the latter end of the age.
The sky, the sun goes round and round, not the other way round. The North Star has never moved, so how can we be spinning? Oh, maybe now you'll wake up, see the truth that's in your eyes, know that all they've shown you is computer tricks and lies. And you'll know no need for gravity. All you need is density on the earth that can't be moved. The earth that can't be moved. So one day you wake up, see that earth ain't no ball, and you look in the distance and see there's no care at all. As they try not to worry, as it does all who've been fooled. They've been ramming it down your throat since the first day you were school. It's not moving. It's not moving. Yeah. It's not moving. It's not moving. Yeah. Going back to the textbooks, what they first told you, gotta take another look at Earth, 'cause it doesn't move.